In this session, we'll look at how shifting towards more sustainable products can create more sustainable consumption patterns. Shifting consumption involves choosing products and services that are less detrimental to our economy, society, and environment. For example, in the past, almost none of our electricity would have come from sustainable sources like wind, hydroelectric, or solar energy. Today, they account for a considerable amount of the electricity used in the EU. The role of citizens in moving society towards a more sustainable model is an interesting one. It's not merely a case of decisions being handed down from above by policymakers to citizens. Sustainable consumption can also be influenced from below. Initiatives and actions among citizens can bring about changes in consumption. But is it their place to drive change? If so, what avenues are open to them? The simplest way is to buy products they approve of and shun those they don't. Citizens can also work together in collectives. For instance, collective purchasing or consumption at local level can aid sustainability. Or should they focus on directly influencing legislators? They can vote for politicians with more sustainable policies, for instance. They can also lobby them through direct correspondence, petitions, or demonstrations. Citizens can lead by example as well. Their own behaviour can influence others to adopt more sustainable consumption patterns. Of course, not everyone is in a position to shift towards sustainable consumption. For example, a homeowner can decide to add a new insulation to their house to reduce energy costs, whereas a person in a rented house may have no say about insulation. The same applies to people's economic situations. If making products more sustainable increases their costs, not everyone will be in a position to buy them. Rather than being a uniform group of people, EU citizens are all different. Some are interested in sustainability, others are less so, or they have other priorities. Some have the information they need to be sustainable in their choices. Others may not have time to find out more or may not have the information available to them. If citizens don't have relevant information, what role is there for governments to provide it? Not only can information campaigns be used to help citizens make choices, they can also be used to explain decisions government make on behalf of citizens. A popular way of providing information to citizens is through labelling. Done well, it allows people to make informed choices confidently and quickly. But poorly done, it can lead to distrust and confusion. Matters aren't helped by the wide range of terms and phrases used in standards across the EU. Is there a role for policymakers to introduce uniform EU terminology and standards? Providing information is only one part of the equation. There are no guarantees that people will act upon it. Should policymakers be more direct? At national level, should they dictate what citizens do? And at international level, should they prescribe what countries should do? Or should it be left to individuals, organisations and countries to use information as they see fit? For instance, in setting targets for alternative energy use, should EU policymakers recommend to member states what technology should be used and to what extent? Perhaps national governments are better placed to tackle energy issues given the different energy sources individual member states rely on. Or do you think that this would mean that individual countries wouldn't do enough to reach the agreed targets on alternative energy use in the EU? The same questions can be asked in connection with transport, in particular in relation to private car ownership. By 2050, cars will account for over 2/3 of passenger transport. Is that something policymakers should be looking to reduce? And if so, how? Should they be prescriptive? That might be difficult. After all, being prescriptive could affect the choice available to citizens, and that can lead to resistance. Policymakers could help offset the impact of binding measures by creating supportive incentives. For example, they could introduce financial support for cycle-to-work schemes, or they could create tax breaks for low-emission vehicles. Alternatively, they could put disincentives in place. For instance, they could increase levies and duties on fuel. Which option do you think is the most acceptable, or do you disagree with all of them? Another option is to favour collective transport solutions over individual cars when transport infrastructure is being planned. That isn't easy either. For some, the car is a symbol of individual freedom. Now we'd like you to discuss some of the issues relating to the topics highlighted in this video.